decisions that they make are being highly influenced by CMP. They're making more decisions like this tax on solar on people's, right on people's homes that was something that CMP was proposing. It makes it more difficult to have a utility company be working on the side of the people when that is their business model. Does that help answer your question? John might have something too.
Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit to that. We had a really interesting meeting with Alan Richardson, who's the CEO of AmeriMaine, which serves Eastern Maine. CMP is much bigger. And what we learned from that is that utilities are, they're monopolies, and so they're highly regulated. And the regulations that were developed for the utilities are 100 years old, for when the US was first electrified. So the whole thing assumes that there's going to be big central generating plants in the distance somewhere, sending power. Back then it was coal produced, now coal and oil, natural gas, whatever, but these big power plants that are sending the power of our high capacity transmission lines, and then when they get to places like MDI, then they're into the distribution. It goes to substations and distributed from there. And the way utilities make money is they're guaranteed a rate of return on their investment. So here you have the utility that's driving policy in Maine is Central Maine Power, CMP. They're a Spanish company that has one purpose, which is to send money home to Spain. And they're taking it out of our pockets by building really high capacity, billion-dollar transmission lines that they are guaranteed a 10% return on. Every time they build a transmission line, it's like a gold mine for them. They're guaranteed for the life of that line. And what Maine should be looking at is alternatives to transmission, which would be decentralized, locally based power alternatives and smart grids. And one of the other things that we need to change is this whole idea of demand charges, which are based on peak demand. So in the past, you had to have capacity for those 20 hours a year when it was 90 degrees out in the middle of the day and everyone was, in their business or industry consuming electricity. And the way they paid for that was by assessing special demand charges to pay for those power plants that they had to have on standby to produce that power. It's very expensive. Well, as we get more and more solar power, the peak demand has shifted. That's when solar is producing the most. But we're still stuck in a regulatory regime that assesses demand power, which you can't offset with solar power under the current rules. So these are the kind of things that need to change. And the utilities need to be able to get involved with smart grid technology that uses batteries, the kind of things they're doing in Vermont with Green Mountain Power, where the utility gives people free electric vehicle charging stations with the caveat that they're able to regulate when those cars are being charged. So you have a high incidence of solar systems in Vermont because they have a better regulatory regime there. But what happens is sometimes you'll have partly sunny days when clouds are going over those solar systems, and the way Green Mountain Power evens out the spikes in solar demand is by shutting off the charging to those electric vehicles. So they're looking at those kind of things. I mean, if we really want to transform ourselves to a sustainable future, we're going to have to get smart. We're going to have to be using the technologies that are viable. And we also, I'm president of Maine Citizens for Clean Elections. We're trying to get big money out of politics and reduce the influence of money in our political decision making. You have the highest paid lobbyists in Augusta from CMP. 2 or 3 of these guys descend on the legislature every time there's a solar bill. And NRCM has some really talented people like Sophie, but money talks in Augusta. And that's one of the reasons why we're hampered right now, is because you have these lobbyists selling their bundle of goods to the legislature, and they're slick and they're effective, and we've got to overpower them with people power. And that's what we're realizing at A Climate to Thrive. You know, we're going to have to get involved in Augusta, and we're all going to have to make our voices heard to overpower the people that are only there to see that a foreign-owned utility is making more money out of the pockets of you and your neighbors.
Just one follow, because it is a complicated story in terms of how and why we're in this situation. I highly recommend an article that was in the New Yorker about 3 years ago. If you just Google Bill McKibben, New Yorker, and Power to the People, and it's this great article that just talks about the utilities and how it works and what are some of these roadblocks. Because I think it's really important that we see it can be done in Vermont, a rural state with not a lot of money, and without the vision, like Gary was talking about, we need to change our vision, and we have to stop saying that it can't be done, because it can be done, and there are other states that are doing it, and Maine needs to wake up to that and actually start to follow a different vision. So I highly recommend that article, Power to the People, Bill McKibben, New Yorker.
Thank you. Martha, did you want to
Yeah, I just
add?
wanted to comment, and I do think we have a very basic political problem here. And I'm just wondering how the Vermont's Green Mountain Power got started, and what the chances are that we could replace some of our utilities with such a community-owned power.
Vermont doesn't have the deregulation that we do here, so the power companies can own the supply sources, whereas in Maine, the CMP and America cannot own any power generation. And our Public Utilities Commission is so rigid that when Emera wanted to put a microgrid on its own operations plant in Hamden and experiment with solar panels and batteries, just to power their own operation, the PUC said, no, you can't do that. You can't generate power under the regulatory environment. Can you believe it? So when we're talking to the executives at Emera, they're not the ones that are going to take the initiative. We have to set the regulatory environment and the goals for our energy future, and the power companies will follow as long as they can make a reasonable return.
Thank you. Aaron?
So thank you for talking a lot about what needs to happen on the regulatory level, at the state level in Augusta. I wanted to bring it back to Ellsworth for a moment and ask you all, what can we do here? Where should we start? And what's involved? What are some of the costs? What do we need to think about to do this work locally?
Start on that one.
Well, I'll just talk about what we're thinking about doing already. We've had a couple of meetings, and we are focusing, as far as solar goes, on municipal solar for now, which means installations for municipal electricity use. So we're going to be conferring with installers to see, give some estimate of what could be done. And we do need to do, surveys like you all did of, possible sites. I mean, they mentioned the old landfill, there's transfer station, there's school buildings. I mean, we have a lot of that work to do. And we're also thinking about solar farm idea for the community. We'd have people in the community be able to buy in. But again, a lot of this depends on, the regime in Augusta. What is feasible, what is economically feasible. But I think we are determined to go ahead in any case. I mean, the other aspects like of energy efficiency, that's another whole story we haven't really gotten into very much. But, that's another aspect, the weatherization. But I do think solar is a good place to start. We've also talked about electrical vehicle chargers and public transportation, many other aspects of saving energy, but with the goal of getting rid of fossil fuels as soon as possible.
Yeah, and
What are your ideas?
Well, I really think Martha's right. The way we started on MDI was the town of Bar Harbor, and the reason that was exciting to me is because it's so public. The fact that we had to go to town meeting to get approval, and it was controversial, was even better because then people are actually talking about the benefits of solar, and the thing is that for the town council, it was a no-brainer. Not only were we were saving a little bit of money in the first few years, not that much, but the fact that it stabilized the cost of power for the life of the system was what was really attractive to the council, because the thing that public officials are always worried about is every year, like how much is our power bill going to go up next year? You know, how much is health insurance going to go up? It's all those uncontrollable variables. So when you have a solar installation, you know what your power is going to be for the life of the system, which is 30 to 40 years. So these are no-brainers. Town of Mount Desert is doing it on their public works site. Tremont's doing it. And there's a community solar farm in Southwest Harbor on a boat storage facility. So I think starting with your municipal facilities, the thing about Maine is that you have to. It's going to take a group like the Green Team to make this happen, because it's not like Massachusetts where there's so many incentives that developers come to you and say, can we put solar on your roof? Here we have to actually look for the best roofs and work with the solar contractors to come up with the best projects, because the economics are much tighter.
Are there ideas among you for starting points, please?